Okay, thank you guys so much for joining. I am honestly really excited about this. I am a little nervous. This is my first time doing a live webinar. Um, but I'm really excited. Over 100 people signed up after I sent out the invitation and the notice about it last week. And, which has just been so motivating to see. And so I've worked hard to put together just like a presentation for you about the new Cloud Architect exam. And there's only a limited amount of stuff I'm going to be able to go over today because of obviously time. But I think you'll find this helpful, and I think you'll find it helpful even if you are not going to take my course, to be honest. If you're not signed up for GCP Study Hub, I think you'll still find useful tips in this presentation. And, that alone would mean a lot to me that, I'm able to engage people on this exam and help people pass. Of course, I'll talk a bit about the updates I'm making to the course that I have as well. But really, this is just meant to set you up, in a concentrated amount of time. It's meant to set you up for success, regardless of whether you're going to end up purchasing my course and going through the materials. So let me share my screen and we will get started. Okay, can I just get a thumbs up if you can see the presentation? Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So so this presentation is going to cover tips to pass the new Professional Cloud Architect exam. So first, I feel like introducing myself. Some of you know me because you are students on my platform. And for those folks, it's really good to just, I know we're not like meeting, but it's really good to be like in a live call with you, which is just a different way for me to engage with students from obviously the on-demand videos and courses that I post. Hi. To those of you who are new, this is just a little bit about me. So my name is Ben McCancy. This is a photo of me waiting for a bus in Washington, D.C., which is where I live. This was a really cold day last year. It was probably freezing, but it's a photo that I like. And I am the founder of GCP Study Hub. So I launched GCP Study Hub back in December 2023. Since then, I've had over 5,000 people sign up to use the platform to prepare for their Google Cloud certifications. I started GCP Study Hub because I saw that there was a shortage of quality content out there about Google Cloud. There's a lot out there about AWS. There's a lot out there about Azure. And even those courses, I think, have their own issues at times. But GCP is number 3 in the market in terms of market share. And that in terms of the actual size of the market, that's still huge. And so GCP is an area of expertise of mine, and I started putting out content about GCP and GCP certifications, and it seemed to be, of interest to people. So I just continued. And here's a statistic that I'm really proud of. If you've been on my website or gotten communications from me before, you will already know this, but my website has a 100% pass rate for GCP certifications. When I first launched my website, I wanted to reduce the risk for people to sign up, as a promotional thing. So I offered this pass guarantee saying that if you fail your exam, send me an email, show me the result, and I will just refund you. And not a single person has done that in the almost 2 years that I have been running GCP Study Hub for. So I know that one day this streak will end. I am very motivated to keep it going as long as possible, but there's no way I can sustain this forever. Someone will fail their exam. And honestly, it might even make it more believable because 100% sounds fake. So maybe it would sound better if it was like a 99% pass rate. But for now, this is a statistic that I can point to with confidence and I'm very proud of. And so you should know that this presentation and the course materials that you have access to, if you do have access, are they're of the highest quality and setting you up best to understand GCP and the course and the certification. So anyway, just to show you a little bit more about my philosophy and approach to my content, I'm going to show you an email that a student sent me earlier this year. I just think it's a good representative email. So this is an email from Marcos, and he says, "Hey, Ben, just writing to tell you that you're awesome. I took your course to prepare for the Professional Cloud Architect certification and passed on my first try with around 2 weeks of studying. He offered to leave a review somewhere for me, and he just said thank you." So one reason I really like this review is because I think it represents my philosophy for success on GCP exams and how I try to approach my courses. The content gives you clear explanations of the concepts and the tools that actually appear in the questions. Additionally, if you notice, Marcos said he did not need to go buy, other resources or watch supplementary videos to fill in the gaps. I really try to make sure that you can pass the exams with just my courses. I also try to teach from first principles where possible as well, so you understand the concepts, and so that, even if you don't have a heavy tech background, you can digest the information rather than just memorizing the questions, the answers to the questions and things like that. And it's really important to have practice exams that mirror what you will actually see on test day. So there are no surprises. My exams are not exact replicas of Google's questions, because that would encourage people to memorize them, and it's also against Google's policies, but they are similar in the relevant respects, and they train you in exactly the way that you need to think to pass the real exam. And so I think the difficult thing that I'm trying to accomplish here with my content is making the material comprehensive enough to cover everything you need, but not wasting your time on irrelevant content, right? So no detours into things that don't matter, making you think that you're learning a lot, but really it's not relevant, and it's just information overload. And so my underlying belief is that anyone can pass these exams if they study with the right material and in the right way. Marcos here passed in 2 weeks, on his first try, not because the exam is easy, but because he studied what actually shows up on the exam. So this email from Marcos is obviously, it's from May, and it's based on the previous version of the PCA exam, but this is representative of my approach and the approach that I'm taking in developing the new material for the new PCA exam as well. All right, so you're probably like, that's all great. Good to know about GCP Study Hub and you and your approach, but what about the PCA exam? So let's get into it. So let's talk about what is actually different in this new Cloud Architect exam. On the left here, you can see a diagram that I just put together showing the overlap between the old exam and the new one. And so there are a few things to note here, right? So the red circle represents the old exam, the blue circle represents the new exam, and this purple overlap is obviously the overlap of things they have in common. So the first thing to notice is that most of the old exam topics are actually still relevant for the new exam. So we're talking about roughly 70% overlap in my estimation. And if you've already been studying for the Professional Cloud Architect exam, using older materials, you haven't wasted your time. The foundational concepts are still there, but there are a few differences. In my opinion, you need more breadth of knowledge. The new exam covers just a wider range of services and scenarios compared to the old one. About 30% of the new exam consists of topics that were not in the old exam at all. And on the flip side, there are a small number of previous topics, which I'll go into, that were on the old exam but are basically unimportant for the new exam. So things that used to show up regularly but just don't appear much anymore, or they've been deprioritized. So the takeaway from this slide is that if you've been studying for the old PCA exam, you have not wasted your time because a lot of that stuff is still relevant, but studying those previous materials is not sufficient because there's this extra stuff that you're going to need to know. So let's get into some tips for actually passing. Tip number 1 is that you should study these topics less. So first is App Engine. It used to show up more frequently, but it's much less emphasized. In general, I think Google is encouraging people to just use Cloud Run as the kind of serverless app deployment option on GCP. So I think across the exams, actually, App Engine is just kind of being deprioritized, although it's not being deprecated as a service. Secondly, programmatic interaction with GCP and commands, from the SDK like G-Cloud. The old exam would kind of test you on specific commands or flags and syntax, but the new exam focuses more on just kind of best practices, high-level decision-making, rather than memorizing exact commands. And then pure lift and shift migrations without a business or modernization angle are kind of also deprioritized on this new exams. The old exam had some scenarios where you just kind of move a VM to the cloud, or you move this workload to the cloud, and it would ask you like, where does it go, right? But the new exam wants to see that you understand more of the business context, and a little bit more like complicated modernization scenarios and opportunities, not just the analogy of something being on-prem and what should it go to in the cloud. Fourth, remote access to VMs. This used to be tested. It's much less of a focus now. Quotas and limits and billing. You don't need to know this nearly as much anymore. Some networking stuff as well, like subnet sizing, CIDR blocks, IP management. The old exam had some more detailed networking questions about that, but they're emphasizing more kind of these managed solutions with VPCs in the cloud in this new exam. That this level of detail is not as important. Now, to be clear, these topics are not necessarily irrelevant, right? So if you see a question on these in the practice exams or on the actual exam, don't email me saying that I misled you. They can still show up, but they're lower priority. And I'm just trying to give you an accurate sense of where you should be spending your time studying, because there's a lot to know, right? Now, on the flip side, we've got tip number 2. You should study these topics more. These are areas that weren't emphasized on the old exam as much, but they're now more likely to show up on the new exam. So we've got app dev and deployment. We've got, Cloud Run is more of a focus. Cloud Deploy is a newer service, and knowing when to use, Cloud Deploy versus Cloud Build. Application Integration Service is a newer offering for connecting applications and automating workflows between them, including ones that are outside of GCP. Application testing strategies like unit tests, integration tests, load tests, smoke tests, when to use each in different environments. Direct VPC egress as well is a networking feature that lets serverless services like Cloud Run connect directly to VPC resources. That could have been like a, not just under app dev and deployment, but under like a networking category. But I think it's most likely to show up in the context of Cloud Run. Security and compliance. So HSM mode in key management service is more likely to show up. Service perimeters, service controls, conditional IAM policies. These are all just kind of newer things that are being emphasized more than previously, even if they had a chance of showing up previously. Conditional IAM policies are actually new. I'm not sure exactly when they were released, but I don't think they were on the old version of the exam at all. Then we have AI and ML services. So this is probably not a surprise. Vertex AI Model Garden, this is where you can access pre-trained models. Vertex AI custom model runtimes. That's something that we'll go over later in the course, in this presentation, actually. Pipelines help you orchestrate ML workflows. These are all things that you need kind of a cursory understanding of. Gemini Cloud Assist is, the assistant that you now can kind of see and access in the console. And then Notebook LM is part of Gemini Enterprise, and it's, you work with, some of you have probably used it, you work with documents using generative AI. And then you've got Colab Enterprise, which is kind of the managed version of Google Colab for teams to coordinate or collaborate on Jupyter notebooks like they do with, Google Docs and things like that. Data storage. Data and storage. We've got AlloDB. That's something that's more emphasized and wasn't really on previous versions of the exams. File store service tiers is something you need to be more familiar with. Big table schema design, another thing you need to be more familiar with. There's only a few listed here, but really like data and storage is not a main focus of the PCA exam in general. It's just these few differences with the past exam that I wanted to list. There's also migrations and resilience. I'm kind of bucketing all together. So migration center is something that is emphasized a bit more. VMware Engine lets you run VMware workloads natively on GCP. So knowing just kind of about that it's an option. Backup NDR is Google's solution for protecting workloads and meeting recovery objectives in certain scenarios. And that just was not on the previous version of the exam at all. And then we've got Kubernetes Engine. So this is something that, has kind of always been available, but it's just being emphasized a bit more. So monitoring GKE, different ways of monitoring GKE to track the health and performance of your clusters, and then knowing when to use vertical and horizontal pod autoscaler is also important. So if there's any one slide to take a screenshot of or to guide your studying, it's probably this one. I'm not going to teach you these topics today, obviously. I mean, we're already like a half hour into this meeting, or at least a half hour since this was scheduled to start. So, the point of this is to just give you tips to pass, not teach you everything. We only have a limited time, but this is a very good list to guide your studying for success on the real exam. Even if you're not taking my course, take a screenshot of this and go study on your own. And this will help you. So this is not comprehensive, but these are higher priority topics. If you are studying for the new exam, you should make sure that you are spending time on these areas. Cool. Thanks for all the hearts and the and the thumbs up. Let's move on. Ready to move on? Cool. So, all right, tip number 3. Do not spend a lot of time on the case studies. Let me show you an example question to explain why. So this question says that you are part of the development team for EHR Healthcare's customer portal. It was recently migrated to GCP. The application servers are experiencing high loads leading to timeout errors. The application uses PubSub for messaging, and there are no errors logged in for PubSub. And to reduce the latency, what should you do? So your options are increase the retry timeout settings, switch from pull to push, disable message batching, or set up additional PubSub queue as a backup. So what's the correct answer? I would give you more time to think about this, but I'm just going to keep it moving. The correct answer is C, disable PubSub message batching. Now, here's why I'm showing you this question. The new PCA exam has 4 case studies, Altostrat Media, Symbol, EHR Healthcare, shown here, and Night Motives Automotive. So these are the 4. Now, look at this question that we just went over, right? If you notice, you do not need to read the EHR case study to answer this question. All you need to know is that PubSub batching increases latency. It's kind of funny to me, honestly, that you don't need to read the case study to answer this question, and Google emphasizes the case studies so heavily. But the question tells you there are timeout errors, asks you to reduce latency, so you disable batching. The fact that it's EHR Healthcare's customer portal is not really relevant. You could replace EHR Healthcare with pretty much any company name, or not even mention a company, and the question would work exactly the same way. The answer would be the same. And so almost all case study questions can be answered without reading the case studies. Don't spend a lot of time reading the case studies. They're testing whether you can understand GCP services and architectural principles, not whether you're memorizing, the company backgrounds. They are interesting. They can be useful to kind of see what you might need to know in practice as a cloud architect about a client or a customer if you're consulting for them, but they should not be your priority when you are studying. So that was tip number 3. Let's move on to tip number 4. Now, before I reveal tip number 4, we're going to look again at another question. So here's a question prompt. This is another realistic question from one of my practice exams, from one of my new practice exams. And the question states, you are running a recommendation system on GCP. It uses Vertex AI Feature Store to serve real-time features to your application. Your team needs to monitor the system to understand how quickly the application is responding to user requests from end to end. What metrics should you primarily monitor? So this is Feature Store in the question. What is Vertex AI Feature Store? You might, be wondering. And this is something that I'm developing a lesson for. I'm actually going to kind of skim through this because it's not the most important, but it's a centralized repository for storing, versioning, and serving pre-computed ML features, so you can reuse them. It's very low latency. It helps to track feature drift and data quality as well. So it's kind of that central hub that connects feature engineering for both training and serving workloads in Vertex AI. You can see on the diagram here, you have your feature engineering process, and then these get centralized into the Vertex AI Feature Store that acts as a single source of truth. The Feature Store handles all the complexity of versioning, storage optimization for use with your actual models, and then the workflow branches off into model training and also serving predictions. All right, so this is good to know, right? But the reason I showed that question is because, kind of in a similar vein to the case studies, you don't necessarily need to know what Feature Store is to answer this question. Here is the actual question as it might show up on the exam. So the answers, the answer choices are throughput, feature freshness, error rate, and latency. In order to know that latency is the measure of how quickly your application is responding to user requests from end to end, just knowing that would allow you to answer this question. You don't need to know Vertex AI Feature Store. So the 4th tip that I have for you today is that just because a question mentions AI, that doesn't mean that it is testing AI. Google still wants you to understand how fundamental knowledge and principles, things that an architect would need to know, how they still apply to new technologies and new services, including AI services. And this leads me to my next and I think final tip that we're going to go over today, which is watch out for fake practice tests. So here is an example of a question that looks legitimate at first glance. And I am mentioning this because obviously I think my practice questions are the best and the most realistic. But also, even if you're taking my course, you might want to supplement with other practice questions out there that other people are publishing. And I just want you to know what to look out for. So here's an example of a question that looks legitimate at first glance. Your company is migrating to GCP. Your tech lead, decides to implement automated backups, disaster recovery procedures, monitoring alerts for all critical systems. And which pillar of the well-architected framework, Google's well-architected framework, does this represent? So this is a business scenario. It mentions the well-architected framework, which is in the new exam guide. So thousands of people will see this and think that it's a realistic practice question, right? But here's why fake practice questions like this fool people. The exam guide mentions well-architected framework. The question mentions it too. People will assume that it's legitimate. And so the logic chain here, it's sensible and it's convincing, but this is actually not a realistic question that could show up on the exam. In reality, someone probably just put this the exam guide through ChatGPT and asked it to generate practice questions or asked it to generate a question about, the well-architected framework. And something being on the exam guide doesn't tell you, how it's going to be tested. And the reason for that is a clue to figure out whether or not something is a question is fake is that the real exam tests architectural decision making instead of actual definitions of things. So there are many ways a concept can be tested. The question represented here is not how Google typically does it. In fact, the well-architected framework itself is unlikely to be tested explicitly in a question. You're just supposed to be familiar with it and familiar with the approach that Google is putting forth in its framework. AWS also has a well-architected framework. It's kind of, a thing that the cloud providers are adopting. And they are, they're not going to ask you what the pillars are of the framework, but you're going to, if you are familiar with the well-architected framework, it would help you answer other questions. So I just want to make the point that just because, the exam guide mentions something and a practice question also mentions it, that doesn't mean that the practice question is realistic. So, it's important. Google is trying to test whether you can apply these principles without explicitly naming them. And that's a theme that we saw not just on this tip, but in the previous example of the Vertex AI feature store, right? The question wasn't even actually about feature store, although there will be some questions on the new exam that pertain to AI and Vertex AI, but it was actually about latency. And your understanding that latency as something important to measure still applies even when you're using AI services. I think someone put a question in the chat about the well-architected framework. I'm just going to keep things moving because we are already, close to the end, and I want to be respectful of people's time. And I don't have the opportunity to just to kind of like teach the actual topics today. This is more about like tips to pass the exam. But I'm happy to. If you follow up with me, if you email me, I'm happy to share more about anything on this in this presentation. Okay, so now we're going to go through actual practice questions. Thanks for understanding. Appreciate the thumbs up. All right, so practice questions. Let's work through a realistic practice question together. Your company is developing a healthcare analytics platform that must meet strict data residency requirements. All patient data must be stored and accessed only within Canada. I have Canada here. It could really be any geographic area, doesn't matter. And no data may be transferred or read from any other region. What steps should you take to ensure that the application meets these requirements? Select all that apply. There's actually a typo here. It should say, what 2 steps should you take? So here are your options. We've got use IAM conditions to restrict access to Canadian IP ranges, configure VPC service controls to define a security perimeter, set up firewall rules to block all incoming traffic, using IP filtering, apply an org policy with resource location constraints, configure load balancing to route all client requests to a backend service residing within the region. So take a moment to think about this. I'll give you a few seconds, and then we'll go over what the actual correct answers are. All right, so the correct answers here are B and D. So VPC service controls create a security perimeter around your Canadian projects that prevents data exfiltration. They prevent data from leaving those boundaries. That is a hard technical control. And VPC service controls are likely to show up on the exam in some way. In fact, you're almost guaranteed to get a question about it. Not necessarily this kind of question, but you're going to need to know what service controls are. And org policies as well will likely show up on the exam in some way. So an org policy with resource location constraints can ensure that resources can only be created in approved regions, so that you can't, accidentally spin up a database or a VM, in the wrong location. And the other options here either control where users connect from or where the traffic is routed, but they don't actually enforce where the data is stored or processed. Here's the next question. your organization is planning to migrate on-prem virtual machines and an SAP instance to GCP. You need to quickly estimate the costs of running these workloads in the cloud before proceeding with the migration. What should you use? So we've got the pricing calculator as one option. We've got billing reports as another option. We've got the migration center as a third option. And we've got migrate to virtual machines as the fourth option. Again, I'll give you a second to think about this. And the answer here is C. So migration center was something that I had on a previous slide about newer things that you need to know about for the new PCA exam. It's built specifically for this scenario. So it's designed to assess your on-prem environment, even discover your workloads if you can connect it to on-prem, provide cost estimates for running them in GCP based on the actual workloads. And what's interesting about this question is previously the answer to this question probably would have been pricing calculator. In fact, I remember actually designing some practice questions for either the PCA exam or the Associate Cloud Engineer exam where the pricing calculator was the answer to a similar question. And Migration Center is relatively new, and its use in this way is relatively new, where you're using it to estimate costs for a migration. But this is something that Google has developed and continued to build out in the last couple of years, I think, where they let you estimate the cost of specific workloads, including, for example, SAP, in the cloud. And you're not just manually putting in, data or information about what you expect your workloads to be in the cloud in the pricing calculator, and then seeing what price it spits out. It's more of an automated approach. So you would use it you would use this for this scenario where it's like a migration specifically, and knowing when to use that instead of the pricing calculator is something that could be tested on the exam. All right, here's another one. This is the last practice question we're going to go over together today. You need to deploy a machine learning model from Vertex AI Model Garden. It requires a custom prediction a custom prediction routine with specialized pre-processing logic. What should you do? So Model Garden is Vertex AI's collection of pre-trained models from Google and third-party providers that you can deploy without having to train your own model from scratch, right? So it's asking you how to deploy a model from Model Garden that you don't have to train yourself, but it does require a custom prediction routine, custom logic when it's making its predictions. So what should you do? The options here are to deploy the model directly from Model Garden using the one-click deployment feature available in the Model Garden interface. Two is download the model from Model Garden and deploy it on a compute engine instance with your custom prediction environment. Export the model artifacts to cloud storage and use Cloud Run to serve predictions with your custom prediction routine. Create a custom container with the model and prediction routine and push it to artifact registry and then deploy it to an endpoint. So I'm going to keep things moving because it's almost 12:45. The correct answer here is D. So when you need custom prediction logic with a Model Garden model, even though you don't need to train it yourself, you need to create a custom container that includes both the model and your pre-processing routine. You need to push that to artifact registry. You need to deploy it to a Vertex AI endpoint. This is an example of a question where you actually do need to know something about Vertex AI and the AI tool being used here, right? It's not an in-depth thing that you would need to know like you would for the machine learning engineer exam. But this isn't like the other example where we saw, it mentions feature store from Vertex AI, but really you just need to know what latency is and the fact that latency would still apply. And deploying to compute engine here might work, but that means that you're managing infrastructure yourself instead of using managed services. Cloud Run could technically serve predictions, but Vertex AI endpoints are purpose built for ML serving. and they'll give you better integration with the rest of the Vertex AI platform. I saw a question about when the updates to the course will be complete. I'm about to go over that, so stick around. And then that'll be the end of this webinar. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Some of you are probably wondering, when the course is going to be updated or what the status is of those updates. So that's what I'm going to go over on this slide. And it is 12:45. If you need to skedaddle and move on to something else, no problem. I will be sending out a recording of this so you can get the rest of the discussion there. But now, how can you get more practice? I appreciate all of the emojis. I have a few more things to go through here, but essentially, so I have developed 7 updated practice exams, and right after this call, I will be releasing them. So I have one of these practice exams that is just on new scenarios. So it's in that Venn diagram, that I had with overlap of the new exam, the old exam. It's covering mainly that blue area that is new scenarios that were not on the previous version of the exam. So you can drill those. The stuff that is heavily prioritized in the new exam, but not as much in the old exam, that's what that first practice exam is going to be. And then the other 6 will contain everything that's relevant, including stuff that's still relevant from the previous version of the exam, previous topics you still need to know, as well as that new stuff. And so that will be available right after this webinar. You guys will have the first opportunity, or at least the first awareness and knowledge of the fact that that's being released this afternoon my time. And essentially the same guidance applies that I've given to some of you and all of my students in the past, which is that if you aim for 85% or higher on these exams and you score that consistently, you will pass the real thing. And then in terms of updated video lessons, so the videos and the presentations just take me more time. I know you guys understand this, and I'm really trying to push out the videos as soon as possible, but those are not ready yet. I would say I currently have 80% coverage of all the topics you need to know for the exam. And so that's, the relevant old stuff, that's still in the course, plus some new stuff. And by next Wednesday, I plan to have 100% coverage in my video lessons by November 12th. That's next Wednesday. So that's a week from now. If you are taking the new exam in the next week and you really need to take it in the next week, you will still be fine if you go to my course and you drill these practice exams, right? The practice exams are up to date. They are there for you to use starting today. And you will do well on the real exam if you get 85% or higher on those practice exams. I wish I had the videos ready for you guys today, but that will take me a little bit more time. So if you want access to the videos before you take the exam, maybe push back your exam a little bit, or just, get started on the practice exams or some of the content that's on there now that is still relevant for the new exam, but doesn't necessarily include all the videos I'm going to be releasing soon. So I appreciate your understanding about all that. I'm just trying to be transparent about where things are at and what my plan is. So that's the situation. And this still comes with a pass guarantee. If you fail the real exam, email me. I will refund you. Again, that hasn't happened yet. I know it will happen at some point, and it'll be no problem when it does. But just let me know, and I will refund you. And hopefully, I can learn something about how I can update or improve my content to make future students more successful. But I'm very confident that if you score 85% or higher on the practice exams, you will pass the real thing. All right, so that's it for this webinar. I hope you found this helpful. If you are an existing subscriber and a student of mine, I really appreciate your support. This was a new thing for me, this live webinar. Maybe I'll do more of these in the future. It seems like you guys enjoyed this. If you're new to GCP Study Hub, welcome. If you have questions about the course or the material, or what you would get if you signed up, let me know. You can email me with any questions. Even if you don't sign up for my course, I wish you luck on the exam. It's challenging, but it is worth it. And I think it's a great way to learn and to stay up to date with the latest developments in cloud, in tech, and GCP. If you have any questions about this presentation or anything else, I believe in having a direct relationship with my students. I try to do that to the best of my ability. Don't hesitate to email me. And in the meantime, take care and have a great day. I know there are a lot of questions in the in the chat. Let me look and see if I can answer any of these real quick. I won't be able to go through all of these. Okay. There will be a copy of the recording. Yeah, well-architected framework. I'm gonna release a video about that. I can't go into that in detail right now. Sorry, I couldn't see these questions and stuff while I was actually going through the webinar. Okay, besides GCP Study Hub and official GCP videos and exams, thanks, Enrique. Do you recommend reading or watching anything else? I mean, my whole goal is to make sure that you don't need to do that. That you don't need to do that. Of course, it's. I mean, it is. It can only be helpful to look at other materials, but my goal is to make sure that you don't need to look at other materials. If you take my practice exams, if you watch my videos that I'm going to be releasing over the next week, you will pass the real thing. But of course, I'm not going to stop you from looking at other things. I just can't vouch for other content necessarily out there. Okay, good point, Mohammed. Do you have in your mind adding more GCP courses like network engineer? Yes, I do. I am focusing on updating this PCA course before I get to new courses, but I have a goal of eventually going through every GCP certification and creating a course for it. It takes time, and I am trying to do it as fast as possible without sacrificing quality. But yeah, network engineer has been one that's been requested quite a bit, and DevOps engineer is another one that's been requested quite a bit. So I just need to figure out how to prioritize them and get them released as soon as possible. Okay, presentation material of courses, making them downloadable. I understand the fact that videos are time consuming. Here's what I need to decide about that. And again, I'm just trying to be transparent about my reasoning here. If I release the presentations, I've had situations where I made content downloadable before and folks just kind of downloaded the content and then canceled their subscription and like shared it with their friends. And so I'm trying to, I would like to figure out a way that I can share the content in a secure way. But I understand that it is time consuming to watch the videos. So I want to figure out a solution there. I just haven't figured out a good one. So I appreciate that feedback. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all the encouragement. Would there be newer practice questions along with new additions? Yes, I think I answered that. Hope the old exam sets in your course will still be there along with the new ones. So I am curious why that would be necessary. Maybe I'll follow up with you separately. I think Prasun. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Sorry, but the questions that are still relevant from the old exam sets are still going to be available. but I'm not sure what the goal is or what the purpose would be of keeping the questions that are no longer relevant for the new exam in there. So if you can help me understand that, that would be great. Will I be updating all the videos all at once? Sujata, good to see that you were able to join. So they won't be all updated at once, but in practice, most of them will probably be released at once in a week or so, by next Wednesday. The way this kind of works for me is I typically kind of go through and create the slides for everything. And because sometimes when I'm creating a new slide, it makes me realize that I need to add something to a previous slide or another section. I try to do kind of all my recording at once. So I have developed some of the new videos already, but I will be probably releasing most of them at once by next Wednesday, closer to next Wednesday, because of the dependencies that can sometimes happen between, the different sections. And I think that's an important, it's kind of like writing a book, right? You can't just like publish a chapter. You kind of have to make sure that the parts connect. Have you considered adding a section that recommends relevant hands-on labs as learners progress through the courses? It would really help reinforce the concepts in a practical way. Okay, I appreciate that feedback. Is there a way to get a GCP cert voucher? I do not know of a way to do that. I will look into getting vouchers, but that is something I have not looked into at all. So I don't even know how that works, but I'll look into that. Thanks, Alexa, for the encouragement. Interesting recommendation, Enrique. Did they have any multiple answer questions? Sujata, yes. As with all the GCP exams, there will be some of those. All right, so I'm gonna wrap things up now. We went over the scheduled time, but we still kept it within an hour. I will be releasing this recording. I might clean it up a little bit, just because the experience of watching it back is, I think, a little different from it being live. But thank you so much for joining. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Maybe I'll do this again about some other exam or other topic. Thank you, guys. Take care.